And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on Sunday, October 26, 2025. And starting with the state of the sea ice, we can already see from a past couple of days it's beginning to grow and expand across the Beaufort Chukchi Sea coastlines and extending up into the Arctic Ocean, and this trend will only continue as temperatures continue to cool down. We are going to see overall a cooling trend as we finish the month of October and head into early November, and that ice also beginning to develop in areas of Kotzebue Sound and Norton Sound. So as we'd expect, this is the early season ice growth and expansion, and that will continue as temperatures get colder. Now across much of the Gulf and back here through the Bering Sea, we have this popcorn convective cloud pattern. These are scattered showers. There could even be a few flashes of lightning, rumbles of thunder along the areas of the Gulf Coast and out here in the Bering Sea. No major storm at this time, but we are going to see a much more active weather pattern shape up as energy. We have low pressure energy and moisture coming up out of the North Pacific and up into the Gulf as we go through this upcoming week into next weekend to bring in the early part of November. Quick check to the satellite image here. We do have a fair amount of clearing up along the west side of the Alaska Range into the western interior, but still some lingering areas of light snow and fog along the lower Yukon in through Bethel. So in that area, it's kind of hampered some of the air operations in support of the recovery here of the devastating storm along the YK deltas a couple weekends ago. Conditions may start to improve here as the winds become more easterly as the low pressure energy over the Bering drops down across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula later tonight, and especially Tuesday, Monday into Tuesday. We still have some weak low pressure lingering in the Gulf, but there is going to be a compact, stronger low lift out of the North Pacific down this way on Tuesday. So by Monday, here's hints of that low. Still weak low pressure, just generally lagging troughiness here in the Gulf, extending back southwestward. But notice where this low had been up here in the Bering, in the west-northwest quadrant of the Bering, it's sinking southeastward, bringing down some colder air and also pushing in through the eastern Aleutians and lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula, and this energy will coalesce with the system coming up from the south. We have another fast-moving low that's going to be coming up out of the North Pacific into the western Gulf for Wednesday into early Thursday. So that'll be the next one after we get by this lead system. This is the first one in a series of lows and fronts that are going to bring wind and heavier precipitation along the Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle. So by Tuesday, look at this low down near 960 millibars. High wind watches in effect for the southern Panhandle for Tuesday afternoon into early Wednesday morning, and there will likely be marine advisories, warnings issued for that given the wind strength. Certainly at least gale and even storm force winds accompanying this system. And then the next one that comes up out of the North Pacific into the western Gulf will likely also have some storm force winds by the time it gets in that area outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island for Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So here is the forecast for Monday. Inner channel southeast winds 10 to 15 knots, waves a couple of few feet. Outer coast south winds 15 knots south of Sitka off of Craig. Turning easterly by the time we get outside of Cross Sound and up toward Yakutat, Cape Suckling to 25 knots, waves 5 to 6 feet. On Tuesday, you'll see the hints of the system coming in. This is through Tuesday afternoon, so the strongest winds are going to impact the southern Panhandle Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning. So we do expect some of the higher wind gust here in the higher terrain of Prince of Wales Island and our surrounding Ketchikan, Metlakatla. We could see some wind gusts 60 to 70 miles an hour in the higher elevations there. So there at the very least will be gale warnings and probably maybe even storm warnings for certain areas here come Tuesday night and early Wednesday morning. But otherwise, inner channels, southeast to south winds, Dixon entrance to the area off of Prince of Wales Island with waves 7 to as high as 12 feet off of into the open waters of the southeastern Gulf. North winds 20 knots, Lynn Canal as well as Stevens Passage with waves of 4 feet, and then brisk offshore flow 25 to 30 knots, especially out of Cross Sound down through Sitka and Port Alexander. For Monday, southeast to south winds 15 knots, Prince William Sound outside of Hinchinbrook entrance, waves 3-4 feet. Variable winds 10 knots, not only off the Kenai coast, but up in Upper Cook Inlet and Lower Cook Inlet, waves generally just a couple, maybe a few feet. Tuesday, winds are going to become northeasterly, 15 knots within Prince William Sound, 20-knot northeast winds here outside of Hinchinbrook entrance to Kayak Island and off the eastern Kenai with waves 5-6 feet. North to northeast winds across Cook Inlet increasing to 25 to 30 knots, especially off Anchor Point to Kamishak Bay with waves of 6 to 8 feet there in the lower half of Cook Inlet. And that would be on Tuesday. On Monday around Kodiak Island, variable winds at 10 knots as well as east of Chicknick and Sand Point, waves just a couple of feet. Winds will try to turn more southeasterly as we trail out the Alaska Peninsula to Cold Bay and False Pass. That would be on Monday. Waves 5 or 6 feet. And then on Tuesday, with that low pressure area crossing the eastern Aleutians, lower Alaska Peninsula, look for northeast to east winds 25 knots, Shelikof Strait, east side of Kodiak Island. And then easterly winds within Bristol Bay with waves 4 to 5 feet there. And those winds will kind of be a little bit more of a mixed bag as we get closer toward the low center at about 15 knots. The Aleutians on Monday, southwest winds 25 knots around Unalaska as we head our way back to the west. Look for westerly winds, Nikolsky to Atka at 25 to even 30 knots, and then 25 to 30 knot northwest winds just to the west there of Adak. For Tuesday, winds will be westerly across the eastern Aleutians at 15 knots, northeasterly 25 knots, Atka through Adak. And then as we get back out further west, winds will generally have an east-southeast component, 25 to 30 knots, west of Adak through Kiska and Shimia. Along the southwest coast Monday, east winds 15 knots, 3-foot waves within Bristol Bay. Southeast winds to 20 knots with 3-foot waves within Kuskokwim Bay. Just variable winds 10 knots, 6-7-foot waves the Pribilofs. Offshore flow, though, along the lower Yukon coast and up into Norton Sound. Offshore easterly flow 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. For Tuesday, winds are going to be increasing as that area of low pressure slides southeastward. And we also have the impacts of the systems in the Gulf, so that will begin to cause brisk northeasterly offshore flow to 25 knots out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay and extending out here toward the Pribilofs. Along the lower Yukon coast into Norton Sound, look for east winds 15 to 20 knots with waves of 3-4 feet and 30-knot northeast winds at St. Matthew with 10-foot waves. On the west side of the Seward Peninsula Monday to the north side of St. Lawrence Island, northeast to east winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to maybe 5-6 feet toward Gamble. As we come up through the lower Chukchi Sea, kind of a mixed bag of winds there. Easterly 20-knot winds out of Kotzebue Sound, but turning around to the west-southwest once you round Cape Lisburne up to Utqiagvik at 10 to 15 knots, and then westerly winds 15 to 20 knots. Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, waves along the Beaufort Sea coast 3 to maybe 4 feet. And then Tuesday, winds will be east at 15 knots around Kaktovik, southeast to south 15 knots, coming down along through Wainwright and Point Lay with waves 3 to 4 feet. Still easterly winds off of Kivalina and Kotzebue Sound in the lower Chukchi Sea with waves of 2 to 3 feet on Tuesday. Then more of a northeasterly once we pass through the Bering Strait. Winds will be northeast 10 to 15 knots, Wales to Port Clarence and Nome. Also on the north side of St. Lawrence Island with waves generally running on Tuesday in that area 2 to 3 feet.